see, we are, okay, that's not where we are. Okay, I've already forgot where, okay, this is where we are. Let me jump into the next chapter, which I may have already brought up. Yeah. Because it's not that difficult, and we might as well go ahead and get that started here. Okay, so he talks about dry friction. There's two types of friction. I saw something this morning that some college had said they discovered another type of friction, but but there's really two types. There's the dry friction, which actually is because two objects, if you zoom in more and more and more on them, they're going to be rough to some degree. And you could think of it as maybe one of them might be softer than the other. That's another thing. But they're saying that to come up over and move up over these bumps, that it requires a little extra force. And because of that, your free body diagram might look something like that. So if you think about this, the sum of the forces in the y basically will tell you that this weight is equal to this normal force. And then the sum of the forces in the x will tell you that this one is going to be kind of offsetting that one. The key is the sum of the moments. I mean, these are key too, but the sum of the moment, that's why the normal force slid to the right. If you look at this thing from this perspective, if, say, you sum the moments about here, and you know where here is, basically, then basically this moment produced by this and this moment have to be equal to 0. So that's, I guess he's identifying that as point O. That has to equal 0. So he talks about this somewhere down in here. Equilibrium is the fact that some of the forces and the sum of the moments all have to drop out, so that normal force and the friction force often will move to the right to compensate. And here's something interesting is he has these coefficients of friction. Now, what this is this they've observed through a bunch of experiments that this normal force and this friction force right here are proportional. And it turns out dry friction, there's just a coefficient, what he calls coefficient of static friction. There's also coefficient of dynamic friction, which for some weird reason in some books has a K and in some books has a D. There's probably other symbols, but it's basically the concept that if you had like a piece of carpet and a piece of furniture on it, I'm going to draw it so that it's kind of, oops, well, that part didn't look right. So in other words, let's say this is your carpet and this is a big piece of furniture. This is overdone. In order to get it there, you've probably experienced this where you push and then once it breaks free, it starts moving across the floor. So you could basically say, I've moved to a certain point, and then it breaks, and then the force, this would be the static friction here, to break it, and then to move it across the floor is that. It doesn't move until you get to this point. And so you've got a couple things that can happen. One is it starts moving. Two, is it tips over. And he has a problem with the tip over there in a minute. So what happens is often he will relate. Okay, there's too much stuff on this page, but he will relate the normal force to the frictional force, and he relates it through this angle here. And it turns out there is a relationship. You can basically measure that angle and get the mu k out of it. At the Museum of Discovery down in Little Rock, they had this board here. I don't know that it's still there. Had a door hinge right here. And this is essentially like a 2x4. And there were several of them in there. And what you would do is, of course, if you walk up, the 2x4 sits like that. Maybe it was a 2x6. It sits like that. You put an object on it, and you start picking it up. At a certain point, it breaks free and starts sliding down. If that's the case, and he has a problem like that later, you can do a free body diagram of that, figure out this angle that you were at, and you can get the coefficient of friction out of that. And so there was that experiment. I guess it seemed to be pretty boring to a lot of people, but yet, it actually had quite a bit of relevance to it. So if you go down further, so he talks about motion. Like he said, or like I guess I said, here he has the coefficient of static friction. Gets down here, he defines one coefficient of, kinetic friction. Okay, that's okay. And he has the same thing. Essentially, this is kind of what happens. You walk up, you push on your piece of furniture. So say maybe this is 90 pounds, and maybe this is 100. So you push, 40 pounds, the furniture is resisting you, nothing's happening. So essentially, that's basically what's happening. As you push harder and harder, you move up this thing. At a certain point, it breaks free. You got no movement as you were moving up this curve, so there's no movement there. Now, what is interesting is if you walked in the room and you did not pull on this, the static friction would be 0. So this is a logical argument that's actually pretty important in going through some of these problems, and that is this. If this were not there, neither would this. So in other words, when he writes Fs in this equation right down here equal to mu s times normal, this really should be written Fs is equal to, and I should move that over. I don't know if I can here. It should be written as the minimum of, oh wow, I don't know what I did there. Okay, let's hit the escape key. Minimum of this, or P. So in other words, as you move up this curve, you have a point up here where Fs is equal to mu s times normal. That's the maximum it can hold. If, this were 100 pounds and you put 20 pounds on it, then this and this have to equal first. So I don't know if that makes sense. So let's go through, we'll find a problem and go through that. Okay, so problem, let's see. I just want to do a simple one first. Okay, so okay, so let's just look at this one. So he has a crate, it's 20 kilograms. Okay, the force applied is 80. And determine if it remains in equilibrium. Remains in equilibrium means that this force here is offset so that it's not moving. So if you do a free body diagram, he takes his 80 cosine here and he subtracts off this F, which is the frictional force. Then he does the sum of the forces in the Y, tells you that you got this portion coming down, you get this portion going down, and then the remainder of it will tell you that that's NC. From this, you could directly solve NC. And then he does the moments. And what he's doing the moments about is the point O. He's decided to do them here. He's arbitrarily picked a variable X here. This NC is X over there. Then you've got this moment. Okay, so this is not producing a moment about here. But over here, you got this component and you got this component. Those both produce a moment there. So he comes out with an X value. Comes out with an NC and an F. So the question is that the case? Is this legitimate? Well, this is 0.4 and that's 0.4, and that's quite a bit less than 0.4. So this NC actually, it's not located here. It's like really close to over here. And the reason that's the case is because this extra force here created a moment going down that moved it over to the left. So the fact of the matter is, it is in equilibrium. Okay, so here's another one. You got 25 degrees. This is like the thing down in Little Rock. You pick this thing up to a certain angle, and either it's going to do one of three things. It's going to tip over and fall, or it's going to start sliding, or it's just going to sit there. And so first thing you do is you just slap on your assumption right here that this is moving over some X, and you sum the forces in the X. Now what he's done is he's called this the X, he's called this the Y, and he's summed the moment about this point right here. And so first thing he does is go through here, the weight. You've got this part of the weight pulling here, and then the friction force. Then you've got this part of the weight pushing here, and then you got the normal force. And then you've got, if you're summing the moments about O, you have a component going this way, and you have a component going that way. And so both of these are going to be producing moments that way. One's a minus, one's a plus. You end up solving for it by working your way through everything, and you get that. And so, and I don't know that that's, I mean, that's, I don't, he's darkened it here, but I don't know that it's that important to like memorize that. So, then you have to take that and shove it back in there. You find that X is equal to 1.17. Yeah, 1.17. Since these two forces didn't move off, okay, so when it's about to tip, here's, okay, if the force ended up being located, let's say X was equal to 1.5001, meaning that force was just slightly over here, you can't put it there unless you weld a bar on there and the bar holds that force. So at that particular point, the thing will just start tipping over. And so essentially that's all you've got with these. Here you got one where there's friction on the bottom. Usually they don't give you the friction on the top and the bottom. They usually give you the friction at one particular end and say the other is smooth. And so that's it. There's nothing more in here. Now these things can get quite complex based upon, like, here's an example where somebody pushes. Part of it goes, I mean, you have to do free body diagram up here and then carry that load down to here and carry this load over to here. And so you've got to work your way through like some sort of situation like that. So it's basically broken down into free bodies stuff, and that's essentially it. So if you want to take a simple case like this, and I don't even need to take this over, but determine the maximum force that it can be applied without causing the 250 crate that has a center of gravity, without causing movement. So sorry about that. So we'll just put that there, and then we'll put this here, and then we'll put this here. And so the first thing you're going to find out is sum of the forces in the x equals 0 gives you that this F is equal to P. So that F is equal to that P. Then he said this is 250 pounds. So the sum of the forces, in the y equals 0. So just going to tell you that normal force is the same thing as that 250 pounds. So the normal force is going to be 250. Now the moment is what's going to tell you something. So you set up, call this x, here, sum of the moments about whatever this is called, I'll call it O, is equal to 0, will tell you that P times 4.5, that's going to tell you 4.5, that looks funny looking, 4.5 times P is equal to the x times 250. So the question is, what was P? P was F, or wait a minute, the maximum, what did you say P was? The maximum force of P, okay. So F is going to equal to the minimum, let me give myself a little bit better space. F is going to equal to the minimum of, now let me go ahead and do this. Okay, mu times 250, and mu being 4, I'm sorry, 0.4, means I could say that that's about 100. So that should say the minimum of, if I reach 100, breaks free. Okay, that's the mu times n. Mu times n. So let's assume for a moment it reached 100. Now, if I reached 100, so we'll say that, we'll say for a moment I reached 100. If I reached 100, then this would be 4.5 times 100. I think that's 450. And then I take x divided is 450 divided by 250. That one I should just be able to. That gives me 1.8. And suddenly you realize that's larger than that. So if you were to put 100 pounds up here, the thing would start rolling over or tipping over. So that's not going to be your limiting factor. Your limiting factor now is, let's see if I can do this, is that this thing will sit right on the edge. And now that I've done that, I'm saying X by definition is going to be 1.5. And so if I'm solving from that, then P is equal to 1.5 times 250 divided by 4.5. This I should be able to do. Okay, 1.5 times 250 divided by 4.5 for 83 1/3 pounds. So I gotta put 83 1/3 pounds on it. If I put any more than that, the thing tips over, but it never breaks free and slides. So does that kind of make sense? You're kind of working your way through an argument there. If you want, I can do. It really looked ugly doing it right there. So what you got to do is you got to say, it's kind of like that. Does it sink or does it float? But does it tip or does it slide? So first you pick which one you want to do. Here I assumed something. I assumed that it was going to start sliding and that I was pushing it with 100 pounds. The 100 came from this. So I was assuming that it was going to start sliding. When I get through with the thing, I realize, X has got to be equal to 1.8. So that means in order for it to actually slide, it's got to have some sort of thing over here, like a bar or something to the right to hold that weight. But I don't have that. So then I realize the biggest constraint is the tipping. And so then I go back and I say, okay, it's going to tip. Right before it tips, this is where the free body diagram is going to sit, where this X is 1.5. So the key is if I move this thing any further to the right, then the thing is going to tip. So I really need to have it, like if I had it right there, I mean, that's not going to work because, that P would be 0 there and there wouldn't be a frictional force. So then as I increase P, I increase it, and increase it until I reach that point. When I reach that point, that's just before it starts tipping. That means that the X is 1.5. And then I use the moment equation to find that it's 83 pounds, 83 1/3 pounds. So these other problems, let's see, let's just, if I pick one, this is really bizarre looking, but let's pick, I had another bizarre one right there. Which one looks more bizarre? Here, I'll just pick this one. This one isn't too terribly bad. Here, I'll do it this way. Okay, so now I'll drop it over here. I'll just go ahead and drop it on the bottom of this thing. Here, I'll just put it right there. So he says, determine the maximum force P that can be applied without causing the two 50-kilogram crates to move. Now, one of the things he didn't do here is he didn't give me an opportunity to talk about any sort of tipping because he didn't give me this dimension. So if you do a free body diagram on this first one, okay, you got this, and you got this. I'm just going to call it T. Then you're going to have, I'm just going to move it somewhere. You're going to have a normal force. I'll put the weight here because now, and I'm just going to put the normal force here. And I don't know Oh yeah, these were A. This was A and this was B. So NB, NA. Now NA is pretty easy to do. Since they're 50 kilograms, the weight is equal to 50 times 9.81. And so that's going to be this value right here. The reason being is because if you break that away, you get a free body diagram that looks like this. Tension, normal force, and the weight. And let's see, 50 times 9.81, what is that? Hang on. What is that building there called? Dot Brown. That's called Dot Brown. I'll have to go in a minute because I got to go meet. Okay, so this will be the friction force. So this being, I didn't figure, I brought that up, but I didn't figure out the normal force. Didn't figure out the weight. Okay, so 50 times 9.81, that's 490.5. So that's 490.5. So this means the maximum is, what is that? 0.2 times that, or 98.1. So I'll say this is the thing when it starts sliding. Okay, so I'm going to go through the concept of, okay, so I'll probably need to go pretty quick. I'll go through the concept of, first, does it slide? Okay, if that's F max of 98, then the tension is 98. So I've got to go through a logical progression here. That the logical progression is that this one starts sliding. If it starts sliding, the free body diagram on the other one is the tension is 98.1. So this becomes 98.1. This becomes P, which is written like this. And I'll have this being P cosine 30, and this will be P sine of 30. And then I'll have this, which is 490.5. Then I'll have this, and I guess I better call this NB. And then I'll have the friction here on this one. So first thing is, this is going to break down in a bad way, because okay, some forces in the X gives you minus 98.1 plus P cosine 30 minus this friction right there. And I'll just call it F for right now. Then the sum of the forces in the Y equaling 0. Now what I'm going to have to do, I'm going to go ahead and move this. Doesn't matter which way I move it. I'm just going to do that. It might have to be moved the other way, but that's okay. Sum forces in the Y gives me NB minus 490.5, this part going up, and then followed by that to be minus P sine of 30. And now I'll do the sum of the moments, and unfortunately I'll just call this X. And what might be the best place to sum those moments? Okay, so if I put them right here, so if I sum the moments about here, I'll eliminate this and this one. That leaves me with the unknown of this and this thing. If I sum, it's kind of up to you how you'll do it. If you'll sum here, you'll eliminate both of these, and you'll have, I think maybe the best goal is to sum the moments about here. So I'll sum the moments here. It's too thick of a pen. Sum the moments about this point O equaling to 0. And I should have been writing that being plus. I should have written that being plus. Okay, sum the moments about that point. That means this and this aren't in there, but the rest of them are. And you got a problem because you don't know the height here. So this leaves you with an interesting concept, and that concept is there's no way this thing can be thought of as being tipping. So this means he's constructed this problem in such a manner that you don't even have to check the tipping because there's no way to check the tipping. So all you're checking is the sliding. And so then the key is, the only key you've got is one block will start being able to slide before the other. Which one? And I think the back one will slide last. And so if that's the case, then let's look at it from that standpoint. If that one's going to slide last, that is odd that he did not. Did I miss the picture? I need to be down there at 40 minutes. So I got to be down there in 2 minutes. So I may have to call it quits here. So he didn't give us any of these dimensions, nor did he give us these dimensions. So we cannot even check to see if it's going to tip. But the fact that you're pulling it up, there's a part that's pulling it up, means you'll probably get away without tipping, unless this thing is really, really tall and you're pulling it at the center. But I think we're okay on that. So if you don't mind, I may actually come back and continue working this when we come back, if you're okay with that. We got to be there in 1 minute. So, but luckily it's just right there. So 2 more problem sets. The one problem set is going to be on the internal loads. The other problem set is going to be on friction and one other term. Instead of making one due officially on this Sunday, I'm going to make both of them due the next Sunday, if that's okay. Or because now, if I'm not taking off, what's the point of a due date anyway? So I went in and extracted those off, except the one that was the quiz thing, it would not let me